We'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, hang on one second.
January the 5th to order. We are operating under the executive order issued by Governor Lee. We have fewer than 10 members present here, and we're seated 6 feet apart, and we'll be operating continually under that until further notice. Anyone who is joining us for public comments, we only have one tonight here who will be speaking to us during the work session, but if we have others during the meeting on this Thursday night, we will ask you to sign up ahead of time, and you'll be given a number by which you can come in and speak to the board, so we'll stay at the limit of 10 through the whole process. So at this time, we'll call this meeting to order. It is a work session. No business can take place as far as voting. I'll turn it over to Dr. Cox at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, and thank you, board members, for being here this evening, and for those who are joining us remotely. This evening, we will work our way through the agenda that's for the business meeting on January the 7th. And as Mr. Jones said, the public comments for the 7th, there are two options for people to provide comment for the board's information. There is an online form for anyone that doesn't want to physically attend. You have an option by accessing that on our website, and then also we would ask that anybody who wants to appear in person would register with Christy King, and that information is also on the website, that you can email her at Christy, Kristi, .king@sullivank12.net for information about how to sign up. We would ask that anybody that wants to appear in person on the 7th would do the registration by the end of the day, by 4 o'clock on Wednesday, so that we would be able to set that up for you. So just continuing with the agenda, I would just ask board members if you have any questions or comment for anything that is contained on the consent agenda down through communication to the board. We'll begin with 5A if no one has any questions. Okay, the first item that we'll be talking about this evening, this will be an item that we'll ask the board to take action on Thursday night, and this is a consideration of adding soccer program for the students who attend Colonial Heights and Sullivan Gardens. If you recall, we did have a person come to speak during public comment. There was an interest from that community in having a soccer option, and so Mr. Flannery has done some research on that. So to be Title IX compliant, we would need to, in order to offer a spring soccer program, we would need to make that a co-ed program, and we would need to add a coach. So the action would be to approve the program and an $800 stipend for that. We are also researching options for volunteer coaches that could help out with the program as well. So again, that's information for your consideration. That's directly in response to interest in our community for adding a program. I would just say we do offer both boys and girls soccer at Sullivan East, and it's our intention when we have 3 middle schools, of course next year, we would plan to budget and plan for both girls and boys soccer at the 3 middle schools beginning for the next school year. So I'll pause here and see if you have any questions.
I guess I do on that. If I understand what they're saying, you have to equal opportunities, I'm great with that, and I understand that. But the way that the soccer is designed countywide is boys are in the fall or spring, and girls are in the fall or spring, girls are in the fall and boys are in the spring. So if they say that we're starting up this program, I don't understand why, if you make it co-ed, would they still be able to compete with the other schools, or
Yeah,
how would that work?
according to Mr. Flannery's research, we would try to schedule teams that had a co-ed or games or contests with, but it might be, since it's spring, just boys too. So, I mean, the co-ed team might play just boys teams because that's who plays in the spring.
Right.
But
Okay.
to avoid a potential Title IX issue, we would need to make it co-ed since we didn't offer it for girls in the fall.
That could change next year, right, where you'd have
Yeah.
boys
Yeah,
separate.
so we would plan
they all
for.
combine, yeah.
No, next year, we would, as I said, we would plan to have a boys' team and a girls' team, girls playing in
Sure.
the fall for all three of the middle schools. We just didn't do that this year because this came about because of the interest from those school
Right,
communities.
Okay.
Okay? Any other questions about that?
What is your recommendation?
My recommendation will be that we add it for this year. You know, kids, if there's an interest for a team sport, I think we really need to try to accommodate it if we can. Okay, any other comment or question? If not, we'll proceed on then under director's comments. And so at the meeting on Thursday, we will be recognizing our school nurses who have done such a remarkable job. And of course, prior to Executive Order 71 and the restrictions that we're under for Lesson 10, we intended to invite all of our nurses to come in person and present them with recognition and certificate. We'll be doing that virtually. Diane Copus, who is our nurse coordinator, has provided me information. So what we'll do is I will call their names and we'll do a virtual recognition and presentation. Then each one of the nurses will get a certificate. So that's what we'll do. They have done such a remarkable job, and I'll certainly have lots of comments, and board members would be invited to add any comments that you might have on Thursday as well. Item B, I just wanted to take an opportunity to talk about inclement weather decisions, especially in the circumstance and situation that we're operating now. I have sent out some information to staff, and I'll just present that on the screen there. You can see it, but I'll refer to this. I've had some inquiries about what would we do if we had bad weather, and so I'll just share a little bit of the information that has been shared with staff today. Our continuous learning plan that's been filed with the Tennessee Department of Education provides for online learning due to COVID-19. When our board has made the decision to change our operating schedule, of course, to online learning, one of the frequent questions that we're being asked is whether we can use an online learning day, or some people call a CLP day, in lieu of an inclement weather day. The shorter answer to that question is that we could only do so, and this is according to the State Department, after we've exhausted our 10 bank days that are on our calendar. And then if we got to that point, then we would have to receive permission from the State Department in order to use CLP days. One of the things that's an important consideration is that we have to provide meals to our students, including our online learning days, unless that we dismiss school for the day due to an emergency situation, for example, like weather, no utility services. For example, if we have an individual school where the water's off, that sometimes will will cause us not to have school if we didn't have heat in the building, those kinds of things. And as you know, we have a lot of students who do rely on school meals for a significant portion of their nutritional needs. So if severe weather conditions should warrant, extreme weather conditions should warrant during the time that we're operating in an online mode, just like we are right now, we may call a delay or a closure to accommodate the safety of our staff. In the event of a delayed opening, instruction for our in-person learners that are, and our virtual learning academy or VLA students would begin on a delayed schedule. So that's normally a 2-hour delay, but meals will be served. So if we had to call a delay, meals will be served that day. We would just start our schedule of instruction 2 hours later. If we had the need for a closure, there would not be any instruction for the day, just like any other snow day, and there would be no meals provided on the site, nor would buses deliver meals. So keep in mind, too, that while we're online, we do have buses that are delivering meals to families. So, and of course, when we're operating with in-person instruction, delays and closures are handled the way that they have been traditionally. So I just want to take the opportunity to clarify that, since I've been asked about that, and would pause and see if board members have any questions.
Can you send us a copy of that?
Absolutely, yes. All right. Next, I just wanted to give the board a few brief updates on our transition. As you know, we have shared this information with you before, and I'll put that up. So we're in January, and the things that we are slated to do in January, which is on our agenda, is to vote on the middle school names, mascots, and colors. The bus routes are in development. The TransFinder folks are working on that now as we speak. The budgets are being developed with Ms. Deloach, who is meeting with the high school principals that will go into West Ridge. And then our students will be registering for classes at West Ridge and Sullivan East. So if you jump back to December, you see the things that we have done, and we try to keep up with that by putting a check. One of the things that we didn't do in December that is happening now in January is that the fall coaching positions for middle schools will be selected. So that process is underway. And then looking forward to February, planning for meeting, the planning meeting for moves. Actually, that has already been underway, and I'll talk more about that in just a sec. The winter and spring sports positions for West Ridge will be selected, and we'll be setting the staffing after, of course, we have the student information for both middle schools and high schools. I would just say, in addition to that, as you know, we'll be turning over Sullivan North High School to the city of Kingsport at the close of this school year. And so there have been a lot of efforts to get as much material out of that building as we can. So Ms. Rafalowski, who continues to work as a consultant for these projects, and so she's marshaling that for us and has met with the staff over there, and Mr. Hubbard has worked with her. So a lot of things have been moved out of North. We'll anticipate being fully ready to be fully vacated at the end of the school year there. As I mentioned before, students will be selecting their courses for high school this month. We have met with the faculty at the high schools and middle schools, and we have received the staffing requests. We ask all high school and middle school staff members to give us their 3 choices for an assignment, and we have that. That will be considered as we make staffing decisions. And then, as I said before, the mascot discussion will be at the meeting on Thursday, and I'll talk more about that in just a bit. But that is just a little bit of the transition information that I wanted to share with you. Any questions?
Can I ask a question? This is more curiosity. When things
Sure,
come
Mr.
out
Hunt.
of North, where do they go?
Well, it depends on what they are. If they're surplus items that we no longer have a need for, they will go to the warehouse, and we dispose of some of those things on Gov Deals. Some of the things that we have use for will go to a holding place There's some equipment that we'll be continuing to use in our
Right.
programs, and will be moved directly into Westridge. So it depends on what they are. Okay.
More of a comment than well, I guess it is a question also. What is the timeline for turning over the school? I know it's going to be after we're out of school, but there's no way we can take things out of that school while it's still in operation without being more traumatic to those students, and I don't want to do that.
No.
So at the end of the year, we need to have a window there where we can actually make that transition. It's not happening quickly, right?
That's actually addressed in the document, I think, in the agreement that we have with
June the
Kingsport.
30th is the deadline.
It's so many days after the end or no later than June 30th, I believe is what it is. So we have basically until the end of June to have
Okay.
to get it all out. But Mr. Arson, that's one of the things that we made clear is that we're not taking anything out that's being used. As you might imagine, sometimes we collect things and they
Yeah.
kind of have a tendency to stay even though we don't need them. So those are the kind of things we're attending to.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments about that? All right, we'll move right on then. And next, on Thursday, you will be receiving recommendations from the two committees that have worked diligently to make recommendations for naming the two middle schools, the mascots and the colors. And so in both cases, the committees have opted to have students come. Now, we're under this fewer than 10-person rule, but we've figured out a way to do that. The students really wanted to have a chance to be a part of that, so we will have one student representing the Central Campus school, and then we'll have two students that will be here representing the South Campus school committee. And so they will be making their committee's recommendations to you for your information and consideration. So, again, we will be managing that so that there are no more than 10 people in the room at a time. And then just a word about that, as Mr. Jones alluded to, when we will receive public comment, we will only have one person in. People will be waiting in the parking lot, and then we will have staff that will be directing them and perhaps having one person in the vestibule waiting while another is speaking, and then depending on how many that we have. And so likewise, we have arranged to invite our students in those small groups so that we don't exceed the 10 maximum.
We will be meeting in the cafeteria. at
We
the center.
will,
Okay.
and that's an important note, too. Central was not available to us tonight because they do have a game, and that's why we're meeting here at Holston, but we'll be meeting in the cafeteria or the commons area at Central High School, and again, we'll be spaced similarly to this, and we have a lot more room to spread out there, so, all right.
I want to just make a comment there if I can. I know that, people hate it whenever you keep secrets, so I'm not going to keep secrets. I'm going to tell you what my plan is on that date. Sullivan East Middle School had the chance to name their Sullivan East Middle School. Sullivan Central had the opportunity to keep Sullivan Central's name. Whenever Paul was talking about it first, and we've talked about it, and I understand completely how the kids at North Zone wouldn't want to be called the Rebels. I get it, because that was totally against whatever, they're the Raiders and whatever. And I understand that the Rebels has a bad name in some, some way people look at it, and I understand that completely. So I am going to make a recommendation or request that the Raiders were never given that opportunity to keep their name either, and I think that they should. I'm not sure. I've talked to Paul. I'm not sure. He's getting a lot of people in his zone wanting to do that, and they're wanting to either be the Blue Raiders or the Raiders. I'm not sure. He's going to tell me what he's wanting to do on that. But the people in my zone, they feel like really cheated out of their name, because Sullivan South Middle School was something that they've been planning on for years. So they named the scoreboard. They actually didn't get Sullivan South High School. They put Sullivan South on the scoreboard for soccer. The amount of money that it will take us to change all of the items in there. Someone's making a list for me right now. They said they've got to 30 items so far of things that will have to be changed and gone over and done because we're taking the Sullivan South name away. There's a community center there. It's called Southview Community Center. It's because it can see the high school just across the street. There's a Sullivan South Community Chest where they raised money for years. Everything in that area is named around the high school being Sullivan South. We get the high school's going away, but we didn't have the opportunity to say Sullivan South Middle School. And I don't think it's arbitrary. I don't think that we should be arbitrary. I'm not asking this to change the mind of the committee. But what I would like to do is take whatever name that the committee gave and the mascot that the committee gave and add Sullivan South Middle School and whatever Paul tells me, either the Blue Raiders or the Raiders, and run that again, run the survey one more time. That way, the Rebels will not be part of it. I get that, I understand it. But Sullivan North area will have a chance to have a part of that community and have something they can say we got to keep. Sullivan South may have the opportunity to say we got to keep something that we had. And if they vote against it, they vote against it. And if it loses, it loses. But I think that community, both communities, deserve the right to have their school name or their mascot name as an option. And that's going to be my recommendation on Thursday. So I just didn't want to keep that a secret and not let anybody know what I was going to do. So that's it.
Okay.
That's my comment.
Thank you. Just so you know, the committees have known from the beginning that what they're tasked with is making a recommendation to the board, and it will be the board's prerogative as to what action you would take on that. So they will bring their recommendations, and then the board can exercise its prerogative to vote how you see fit.
Let me bring up a point of order for Thursday night.
Okay.
Before we wait until Thursday night. There will be a recommendation from Dr. Cox, and it will be the recommendation of the committee. From my readings, I don't think you can amend his recommendation. I think he would have to be voted down before you could consider an alternative. Now, you know, the attorneys can look at that and see, but ordinarily, if I made a motion, you could amend it because it would just be my motion.
Right.
But what he's doing is bringing the motion of a committee. So keep that in mind.
Okay. I think I can word it correctly, and I'll go ahead and tell you what my thought process is on it.
But I think his recommendation would have to be voted down before you could make a new motion to do another survey. That's my interpretation of the way Robert's Rules of Order would work.
Well, let me just talk it over. That way you can tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm
Well, I
wrong
don't
or
know
right.
that I'm right, but
No,
I think
understand.
in reading Robert's Rules of Order, I think
Right.
that's the way that,
Well, according to our policy, the board does the naming. There's just a committee that comes and brings a recommendation. So if they bring a recommendation, and my amendment or my change or my change request would be to have that one put together with the one I'm saying, the name and the mascot, and run a survey again, that doesn't need to be voted down, and I can table that, and then I can actually do the other thing. I mean, I don't see how I'd have to have one voted down to change the process, because the process will still be completed. Dr. Cox will say, this is what the committee said, and if we say, or if I say, let's take what the committee said and what I'm saying and run the survey again, I don't think there's an action that has to be done on what Dr. Cox brings, because it doesn't say that. It just says that they will bring a recommendation.
but when you bring a motion to the floor, that motion has to be voted on before you can amend it, or else it has to be amended. And I'm
Right.
saying, and you go back and read Robert's Rules, and check and see, but my interpretation is that it could not be amended because he is recommending what the committee,
Right,
Yeah.
but Dr.
Yeah.
Cox can't make a motion.
he's making a recommendation.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So the recommendation has to come forward. Somebody else
Yeah,
has to make the motion
Somebody has to make the
accept it.
motion to accept his recommendation,
Right.
has to get a second.
But my motion could be to do that other instead of accepting it.
So you're saying make a motion not necessarily his, but you're making another motion.
Yes, to take the recommendation from the committee, add it to another, and run the survey again.
Yeah.
Because there's no action that's needed on what Dr. Cox brings us, unless we have a motion to accept it and a motion to second and vote it on.
But he has to bring a recommendation. That's
Oh, that's
the way
fine, yeah,
Robert's rules
absolutely.
of-
But unless it's done that way, that really doesn't have to start the process. So, and I'm not trying to be obstinate, I'm really not. And I'm not trying to do anything other than, I'm just trying to say that I'd like to do something to allow that process to happen. So, and I'm truly asking you for guidance on it, because if you think I'm doing it wrong, I don't want to find it on Thursday.
That's why I'm bringing it up tonight.
Okay.
But,
Okay. I'll discuss it with you at some point. We'll just try to
well,
make
I
sure I'm
think,
right.
we can ask Pat to
Okay.
look at the Robert's rules, because he usually does.
Yeah, I will. I don't know if that's ever come up
I don't,
before.
I don't know either. I do know that the committee was set up, and I don't even know who named the committee. I think it was see, this is a middle school, and that's what we need to make sure we don't lose sight of, that it's middle school communities, and I think we're seeing it as high school community. So 2 years ago, when I brought up calling it South Middle School, Mr. Robinson said it can't be South Middle School. And at that point, I responded, the committee, it's in policy, the committee will study it and make a recommendation. So Dr. Cox, I think, went to the committee meetings. I wasn't involved. Matter of fact, I didn't even vote on the survey as to who was on the committee or whatever.
I think, that's where I didn't hear me at all. I think, I know what you're talking about, but I don't think I ever said it couldn't be South Middle. What I was saying was the North kid was never gonna be a rebel, so it wouldn't make
Right.
sense for them to go there and be a rebel. That's where at Central, everybody that's gonna switch to there as a middle school, they was always gonna be a Cougar. That's what I would said. I mean,
Well-
to me, I like this South Middle. I mean, it gives them a piece, but kids in Bloomingdale, North Zone, to me, they should get a chance to keep something also.
And I think South Middle, from what I understand, was a name on that committee that they,
It was. I can speak just a little bit about that, about the process, and perhaps I should have said that to begin with, and I had intended to kind of go
Dr.
through that.
Cox, Can I
Yes,
ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Because I want you to, from my understanding, because I wasn't here when Sullivan East and all that took place. So will you go back that far to
Yes,
that
I'm-
committee?
that's exactly where
And
I-
then bring us to where we are now?
That's exactly where I was going,
because
Dr. Rouse.
I have a problem naming a committee and asking them to do the work,
Right.
and then me use my position to say, oh, no, I don't like the work you did. So I want to understand, to make sure that I am grasping the whole thing, so that I can
Sure.
understand where Mark's coming from, where Paul's
Sure,
coming from.
I'd be happy to do that. As Mr. Jones said, in consulting with the policy, it says that the community needs to be involved. I spoke with Ms. Rafalowski about what was the process used most recently when names, mascots, colors were determined for both Westridge High School and the current Sullivan East Middle School. And so she talked to me about that. She agreed when I asked her if she would facilitate the meetings in the same manner that she facilitated the meetings for Westridge and for Sullivan East Middle, using the same process. So that was important to me, that since we're kind of all in this process, that we keep it the same. And so we, in doing so, asked the principals to recommend people that would be committed to serving, and the composition of the committees, and these two committees were just like the two committees for Westridge and for East.
Okay, can I interrupt you again?
Sure.
Again, just for clarification. So Dr. Cox, nor the central office, chose this committee.
No.
We put it out there in the community with the principal itself in that
The
community.
principal recommended a teacher, a parent, and a student from each of the schools.
Okay.
The exception to that, in this case, since it's middle schools, we didn't have a student, an elementary student. But I think I think most of the teachers were fifth grade teachers who then facilitated, input from students. So every school that had a feeder interest in the middle school, which included the current middle schools, had that representation. So a parent, a teacher, staff member, and a student. So the committees generated the options by a democratic process. You know, they listed the names on the boards, and in paring that down, only the person who put the name up there could take it off as they were doing that. And then as they removed names, there was a vote, a majority vote to decide each one of the ones that would come off or stay. And so, very democratic. I was very pleased with the commitment and the work that the committee members did. They were diligent in meeting. They were very thoughtful in their deliberation, very respectful to each other. So as Mr. Jones said, I will make a recommendation to you to honor the work of the people that made the commitment to do this work. They pared it down in the case of Sullivan Central to 2 choices and put that out for survey. And then for the South Campus, they pared it down to 3 choices and put that out to survey. And so we'll share the results of the survey and the recommendations that the committee came up with by vote of the
Was
committee.
South ever on
It
on
was.
board?
Yes, it was.
So South was on the board at one
Yes.
point?
So are you saying that it was actually voted to take South Middle School off?
The
Because I
commit-
was told that one person pushed it off. It was a vote?
No, that it was whenever the names went up on the board, in the committee meeting, the only person that could take it off, one person taking it off would be, is if I am the committee person who said put it up there. Okay? So, actually South came off kind of early in the process.
Yeah, I heard there was one person that was really adamant against it, and that's why it came off. So I need to find
Well,
out for sure it was voted. So if
Well,
you're
I-
telling me it was voted, I'll find out. I just kind of making sure.
Well, I'm telling you, I was there when they voted.
They voted it off?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, yes. Yes.
I wasn't involved in any of it, so you know as much as I know as far as, I'm just a firm believer in process is what I'm saying. And, you know, we set the process up by board policy and,
No, I get it, but I'm a firm believer in community too, so I'd really like to
Right.
let the community have a
Yeah.
chance to say, and they didn't have a chance to say that, so I'm just trying to figure out how many people, and if there was a vote, then, I mean, it's just interesting.
It was a committee vote. So, I mean, there was a committee vote to narrow the choices down. So that particular committee went with 3 different choices for name, for color combinations, and for mascot choices.
So that committee actually voted and took the top 3, or they actually took a specific vote to take Sullivan South Middle School off?
Well, I'm going to estimate there were 10 or 12 names that were on the list that was generated. And so, yes, if I said, Foggy Bottom Middle School, that was my nomination, it got put up there. And so, as they talked about it and discussed, since I said Foggy Bottom Middle School, I could have said, I want to take it off, and there would be no vote.
So you're saying that Foggy Bottom's up there, Saudi Daisy's up there, blah, 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 blah. But as that committee discusses as a whole, and I'm hearing everything that everybody else is saying, and then I realize that Foggy Bottom is maybe not the best choice, I then go take
Yes,
Foggy Bottom off.
If I recommended Foggy Bottom and I sensed that the room wasn't feeling it, I'd say, okay, I want to let's make this easy, I want to pull off Foggy Bottom. If whatever, Saudi Daisy, as you said, if that were up there, and I nominated that, or you nominated it, the way that would get off would be by a committee vote. So,
And from your recollection, I'm not questioning this, South Middle was there, but it came off fairly early.
yes,
As a
Right.
specific vote?
yes.
Yes.
By committee vote.
You've helped me tremendously, thank you.
Okay. And so, you know, the committee voted on the choices that would go into the survey.
So they didn't vote every name off, they just voted a few in? I don't, that last comment confused me. I don't understand what you're
I
saying.
don't know what you're confused about.
Well, restate what you said then.
Well, I'm saying the committee voted, this is what we're going to send out to the survey. So they, you know, they had pared the list down, and so, you know, they were even talking about shades of color and accent color and that sort of thing, you know. I think it was Huskies, Wolfpack, and I forget the other one. But, so, I mean, they were talking about how the colors go together and all that. But they all agreed on that and took a vote that this is what goes to the survey. They affirmed that.
So South wasn't pulled off, it was voted out early on?
Yes,
Okay.
it was not
Okay.
there at the point when they voted to send the
Gotcha.
survey
Okay.
out.
But it was specifically voted out.
By committee vote, you pared it down.
How many people were on the committee? 15?
Oh, geez.
know
I mean,
Mark-
I've got a list. I
Mark
don't-
asked for a list.
Yeah,
don't know the
I provided
number. I've got it,
that.
but I don't know the number.
Yeah.
I recall seeing the list, but I didn't know anyone except one teacher
Yeah.
that was on there.
Okay. So anyway, that's the process. You know, I will double check everything I shared with you, but I do know that there was a vote to keep or take away.
That's interesting, isn't it? Mark,
Mm-hmm.
based on evidently things you've been told.
Okay. And, you know, Ms. Rafalowski, I think, even she took pictures of the board, so we have that information, so. Anyway, you'll be receiving the recommendation formally. My recommendation to you will be to accept the committee's recommendation to you. And then the committee's work and my work is finished at that point. Okay, any further question about that? All right. Next is the item of relocating Bluntville Elementary School here to Holston. In this building, is just for everybody's information, the board did take a tour of both of the facilities after we had a discussion at our last meeting, and the board did vote by majority to continue the conversation. So what I would recommend to you this evening is that the board would close the campus entirely for Bluntville, so that Bluntville elementary students would not attend there, that we would rezone at a later date, I guess, the exact boundaries, but the bulk of the students would come here, and perhaps students that are closest to Central Heights would be looked at to potentially go there, especially those that would have been a part of the former Acre zone. Now, so my recommendation the action that I'm recommending is to make the decision to close Bluntville as an elementary school, and then the students would attend either Holston or Central Heights. And then later in the spring, I think we need to be more careful and diligent about drawing the boundaries, just to accommodate the best and safest options for parents, so, and students. So, Ms. Nave, would you present the information? I wanted just to share a little bit of information. You do have this in your packet. I did ask Mr. Hubbard and Ms. Deloach for some information. What you have here is just some information that's historic, the annual utility or operating costs of that campus, And as you can see, it costs about $200,000 or so anticipated a year for the utility. That's just, having the building. Now, we're not talking about staffing or anything like that. So completely closing that campus would be, of course, a reduction in those operating costs. Now, to be in complete complete disclosure, until we would no longer own the building, there will be some utility costs to have, minimal heat and utilities in the building. So it wouldn't be a complete savings. As far as staffing goes, we've had this discussion too. Staff generally follow students. There would be some eventual savings, and as we, staff for next year, and we have had some response to the retirement incentive program that you voted on last week, so we don't know the full extent of that. But there would be some staffing savings. It's just hard to project that, to a fine point. But that's what I will recommend to you for your consideration. And would just stop and see if you have any questions or comments about that.
I know we've talked about this before, but how many students would be left just in the elementary school at Bluntville?
I'll have to go back. I know we looked those up last time, but it's about 300, 311 or something like that. The thing you have to keep in mind, at Bluntville, the fifth grade are counted in the middle school part, so you have to add them back in. But we had, I should have, I've had that, Mr. Spivey, but if you'll give me just a moment, I'll try to pull that up for you.
I was thinking it was 360 something.
It's close to 350.
367.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Wolf provided that information today, and I have it right here. If you'll just bear with me a minute. Okay. So for Bluntville Elementary School, and again, this is pre-K through 4 now, keep in mind. The total is 295, okay? Now, when you look at Bluntville Middle School, what you would add is the fifth grade, and that's 60,
Okay.
okay? All right, so,
Now, the 295 includes pre-K, right?
yes, sir,
Okay.
it does,
So that gives you 355.
right. So, there is room in this facility to host the combined population of both schools. There is also about, I'm going to estimate capacity of perhaps between 50 and 60 more students that could be accommodated according to our PIFA study at Central Heights.
Definitely not. I understand why we're talking about it because of the logistics of the heating and air system and age of the equipment and things, but I'll say my same objection that I had the last time, and it's still going to continue, that, I mean, this community has never had a chance to even come and talk to us. They've never had even a minute to come and say, this is what I want you to do, or there was never any kind of a inclusion of them, which there has in every other school we've closed, or at least that I've been a part of. I don't know what happened in the North Zone back in the day, and I'm sure it's happened. And Ms. Rouse said that she was involved with one. So,
Trust me.
but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we don't need to be better. I mean, I don't like to just drop this on people. I mean, we're telling people in 5 months your school's going to close and your kids are going to go somewhere else, and I mean, my area doesn't like it, but they've had years to get used to it and make plans, and they know that it's coming. I just hate dropping this on this group of people that had no idea. And it's not my zone. I'm not trying to protect, kids from my zone. I just think that this is a bad time to do this. I mean, this has already been all the stress we put on them with COVID and with all of the virtual and VLA and hybrids and everything else, and all of a sudden now we're going to say, oh, by the way, we're closing. And I don't like that, and I do think that we should give them more time, and if we're going to at least give them a year to say, hey, this is what's going to happen down the road, but I don't know, I'm just opposed to dropping this on these kids and teachers and community, and everybody's going to say all of a sudden that, not only your middle school's going to close, now your elementary too, and it just bothers me. It just truly bothers me that we're doing this to them. And
Well, Mr. Iverson, that is why we're making the recommendation now. The other thing that I would say to that is, and I shared at the last meeting, you're going to be operating two rather large campuses at less than 50% capacity in each place.
I realize that, but I mean, I still think that we're making this decision, and I don't want to cut it down to this, and I don't want to make it sound uglier than it is or worse than it is, but I mean, all we're talking about is, you're showing us the cost savings, and I know it's going to be a cost savings. I understand that we're in a business where, you have to make sure the most use out of your equipment and your space and everything else, and there's always a cost involved with everything, and consolidation obviously is saving money. That's why we're doing the high schools and things, and I just don't think it's right to give them no notice. And
I understand,
and
but I wanna-
I'm stopping because it's just a
Okay.
comment, but I
Well,
mean, it's
that's
not a
okay,
debate.
But I just want to clarify, the recommendation is not just about cost. I mean, you toured the facility. We all saw, when you compare the condition of these two buildings, there really is no comparison in the condition, and that impacts student learning. And so that is, and again, I'm bringing it as a recommendation.
I understand.
And the board, certainly, it's your prerogative how you would vote on that. But I just want to be clear, the reasons for the recommendation.
I want to clarify one thing. Didn't you all go meet with the staff there?
We did, yes.
Okay. I mean, I understand the timeline. I get that, but, I want to talk about facts and
Well,
reality, and
well, but-
it's
but-
not no notice, no notice, no notice. It's
No,
been
but-
a few months. Now, I mean, we can say it over and over again for years, which some communities are always going to do when a school closes. I wish we didn't have to close any school, but
I agree.
we also have to look at the fact that our teachers are underpaid dramatically. I mean, look at the spreadsheets, and that we're trying to equalize salaries. And I would have concern too about, I mean, there is a drastic difference between the learning environment in that building and this building. I mean, I don't know how anybody could say there isn't when you look at the age of that building. The fact that even though we're taking the middle school students out, that we still have to heat it and cool it the whole way because it was added onto over
Right.
time. Portions of it, I think, are the oldest building in our school system, which always makes it the hardest
Right.
to do that to. So I'm not saying I've made up my mind one way or another, but I just think we got to be careful. And maybe it wasn't years of notice, but it isn't that we just decided to talk about this today.
Well-
And there has been discussion with the staff, and they've gone to meetings. So I just want to clarify that, because it happened. It's
Well,
real.
I'll clarify my comment, because my comment was the community hasn't been in talk. I mean, yeah, they talked to the teachers a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. It hasn't been long. But the community was never involved. The community was never told. The community was never there was no meetings that said, hey, this is what we're going to talk about, which did happen at South and North.
Well, actually,
And Central.
we had that meeting a month ago in this board that we're going to talk about it. So,
Okay, so we've
well,
given
no, I
them
mean,
a
you
couple
voted
weeks.
against it, but it happened. I mean,
But there was no
that's
community
not
input.
semantics. It happened.
What
The
community
public
input
was notified of it. I mean, I'm not trying to get into a debate. I just want to talk about real facts instead of snippets of words.
Real facts are, the community was not involved. There was no meetings with the community. They've never talked to the community. That's not what I said. I mean, you're trying to say that the teachers, I mean, and I get it, and I agree.
You said nobody knew about it.
I said the community. I said the whole time, the community.
Okay, Mr. Iverson. I think I've made my point. You've clearly
Okay.
made yours.
I guess something that worries me is, and I hope I took it wrong, but both of y'all said that because of the building, it was hurting learning. To me, in these schools, it's our teachers that do the learning. It's not the building. So I hope I took that wrong. I really do. Because I get, if
I said
we
the
went in
learning
Blumpville,
environment,
and I mean, there wasn't stuff falling. The elementary was in pretty good shape, so, I mean, I really hope I took that wrong. Because,
I didn't say, I said the learning environment. I mean, and the building, I mean, it's braced structurally at a part of it with steel because it's falling apart. I mean, I can't think of a room in that building that's as nice as the worst room of this one. I get what you're saying. The teachers are the ones that do it. I completely agree with you. They can teach from wherever. They've proved that this year. But I just think that's a fact. That building's in terrible shape.
I'd have to give the elementary, though, the nod up there, because it was in pretty decent shape. I mean, we walked through it. I've been in other schools that's worse than that. The middle school, then yeah, I mean, because it's older. I
Really
get
old.
that, but I get what you're saying there.
Well, and let me just clarify too, and I certainly would be in total agreement. You know, the school community and the staff are what facilitates learning, but facilities do make a difference. And, you know, when you compare the facility, either part of the building, my comment is just that this campus is newer, it's in much better shape, it's much more comfortable facility to be in, and it's available. That's all I'm saying.
I ran for school board member because I wanted to do everything possible to help every student in Sullivan County have the best education and opportunity possible. I was in education for 32 years as a teacher and a principal for 17 years. There's advantages and disadvantages everywhere you go. There's good teachers and there's bad teachers everywhere you go. It's just like any other place. And I'm going to tell 2 or 3 things here, but I want to go back to where I started my principal career was at Sullivan North. I was a Raider for a while. And having been on the East End all of my life, we always felt that the other end of the county got everything. It didn't matter who you talked to. Is that not right, Mr. Gilmore? Didn't matter who you talked to, the other end of the county got everything. So then I became assistant principal at Sullivan North. And I began to hear from the faculty and staff there, everything goes to the other end of the county. We get nothing. Everything goes to the other end of the county. Well, that just took me aback. And after a few months, being the newbie, I got the courage to say, I don't understand, because on the other end, we think everything goes to this end. So it's all perspective in where you are, in whatever fashion that you are at that time with the experiences that you have. I personally have been through my children's school closing, and I'm repeating myself. I have been through, as a principal, a school being closed where I was in Sullivan County. And Holston Valley Middle School was just closed, which was dear and dear and dear and dear to me. So again, to repeat something that I said before, you have to separate your heart and your head, because they don't talk during this. I didn't want my children's elementary school closed, and there's a whole bunch on my end too, Paul. I could tell you about them too. I didn't want Holston Valley closed. I wasn't there anymore, didn't have anything to do with it, but I didn't want it closed. and certainly didn't want to deal with closing the school where I was principal. But if we see that that is the best thing that needs to be done for all children, then I don't think we drag out the pain, because that wears on the teachers, the students, and the community when they know that's hanging over them, and I know that you know that from the South experience. I think that we, as a board, I guess the one thing that I have been a little bit shocked, I guess I was thinking it was all kumbaya. So I think we as a board need to join hands and be on the same side. I know that we need to vote our hearts, we need to vote our conscience. I understand that. But our students and our teachers are only as good as we are leading them. We are the leaders. Just felt like I had to say that.
Does anyone else have a comment or question concerning the topic? Okay. Again, so we'll be making that recommendation formally on Thursday for the board's consideration. The next group of items are policies that we are submitting for your consideration on first reading, which at the meeting would not require a vote, but we were happy to have Dr. Rouse join our policy committee meeting, first one as we work through this, and we made some good progress, and so we have these policies for your consideration on first reading. Most of them really had to do with recommendations that have been made by TSBA Policy Services. As you know, we're a TSBA policy subscriber, and a part of of that service is they do analysis of our policies and make recommendations for us to bring them current with law and good practice, and in some cases court decisions. So I think in most cases that's what you have here. I don't know, Dr. Rouse, did you have any comment to make about these policies specifically? Okay, we would just recommend them for your consideration.
No
And-
comments about your bragging rights, getting more check marks, being on the policy committee?
I just had one question, and I think I'm reading it correctly, but a teacher actually sent me an email this morning on 5.305, and she felt like that teachers would not be allowed to use accrued sick days for maternity leave, but I didn't read that in that policy at all. In fact, lines were stricken that indicated more flexibility for teachers. So I just want to make sure that I communicate to her that my interpretation is the correct one.
That is my understanding. Ms. Deloach had researched that, and so you're saying 5.305, right?
Yes, sir.
So under section two, I see Ms. Nave has put that up for so if you can see, the language has been stricken there, or is recommended to be stricken is in two. But so you have to kind of look at all of these policies, I think, together. But the intent is to classify the leave as it should be. Ms. Deloach, do you have any comments about that?
I'm sorry, I had to get my microphone off of mute.
Okay, you're good.
I talked to Mr. Gilmore earlier, and we had a little bit of confusion from a lot of people. I think this will clear that up, taking that language out of there, and it will make it easier for our employees to be able to take leaves of absence with their sick leave.
That certainly was our intent.
I'm glad Randall asked that, because I had the same question. I thought that was the intent, but, and then I had one other question under FMLA leave, and it may still apply. I'd have to reread the whole paragraph, but it looks like at the time it was drafted, there was a reason that the 5-year period for military caregiver leave, there's dates that are specific that are excluded from the period from October 2009 to March of 2013. I just didn't know if that's something we should consider removing, given that it's been more than 5 years since the last date of that, because it's just surplus.
Again, on the same policy, 5.305?
Yeah, it's on 5.305, and it's on the second page under military caregiver leave.
Uh-huh.
And it was talking about the calculation of this 5-year period shall not include the interval of, and then it
I
has
see.
dates that are specific, and we're already 5 years removed from the last date of that, so
Okay.
I'd have to reread it and rethink it, but it seemed like it was one of
Okay.
those things where it's probably just left over, and it may actually be confusing to leave it in there.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think what we can do is, we have a policy committee meeting between now and that, and we can check that out. Thank you, Mr. Spivey. Okay. Any other question on any of the policies recommended for first reading? Okay. Again, it doesn't require a board vote, but as you read these and you have questions, just as you have this evening, if you have something that you think needs to be clarified, we would certainly appreciate you letting us know that so that we can look into it and perhaps have the policy committee address it before we would ask you to take your vote on it. Okay? Then, if there's no more, then if you move to unfinished business, we have policies that are up for second reading. I will note that we did remove one for clarification, and that was had to do with classified employees and separation issues. So we wanted to do a little bit more work on that and send that to policy committee from the first agenda draft. So, but we do recommend policies 1.803, which is A, through 6.5, which is item G, for the board's consideration and adoption on second reading.
Go ahead.
There's two other policies close by to that one that you took off the agenda.
Uh-huh.
If you would, I think it's the two prior to it, if you would review those with the policy committee when you do the classified again. 'cause
Which are those, Mr. Jones?
I can't remember what those numbers were, but I think it's 5.302, and then it's not on the list tonight. It's in our policy book.
Oh, you're not talking about one of the policies?
it's not one of
Oh,
these
I see.
tonight.
You're asking us to review, okay.
Yes, there's three that should be tied together, I think.
I see.
If you can look at those.
So the companion policies, I guess,
Yes.
to that one, okay. At the next policy committee meeting.
Right, I looked at it again last night, and I think you can put those together, or at
Okay.
least make them
And
consistent.
then we can make some recommendations for
Yes.
next time. Okay, thank you.
I had one question about, and I know it's on second reading, and I meant to ask last time, but was the intent behind 1.803 that striking that language, basically giving you more flexibility where you're not having to issue citations?
Well, yeah,
to
so
juvenile?
there was a question there, the director really doesn't have the authority to
Right.
issue a citation,
Right,
so we.
yeah,
yeah.
'cause it's a command to
Right.
court.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When that first came into being, we didn't have SROs.
Right.
So the principals was writing those citations left and right.
Yep.
Once we got the SRO started doing that, then the law changed and we didn't have the authority to do that anymore.
Right.
That's what I.
It's just to bring it to current with law. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question about any policy recommended for second reading? Okay. If not, we'll talk about then the operating schedule update. Of course, we're just 2 days into our new semester. I have shared with you what information I do have, and I'll put that up. You have this at your place as well. The information looks a lot different than last time. As you can see, we're restarting the process of collecting information about COVID cases among staff and quarantine. So this will change. It has changed, I think, even so, since this was put together. But I will say that we are working very closely with the health department. We have not had a call with the regional superintendents in Sullivan County and the health department, and the last one was the 16th of December, so we do have one scheduled for tomorrow. We'll be getting some information, and for those of you who may not be aware, the vaccination clinic did begin this week at the on our site, and this morning was very interesting. There were lots of traffic issues, and the vaccination clinics will not be held there because basically this morning the people who are the workers to get the shots couldn't get in. It took me about 40 minutes to get from 394 to the parking lot in the office. So, and it was just basically gridlock, and because there was such a demand for vaccinations. They ran out the day before, and they got 1,000 more in. But we do work directly with the health department, and they are looking at some alternatives that will help, facilitate the giving of the vaccines. The other thing that I would share with you, when the governor made his announcements, it was announced that teachers and K-12 staff would be, I guess, bumped up in the priority into what would be 1B. Our best information is that that those vaccines might be available as early as the 1st of February. That's all we know. I did send some information out to staff to let them know as soon as we have information on the logistics of how that will be administered. We will certainly let them know that. For example, I don't know, because of the storage issues of the vaccine and the requirements, whether it would be doable or practical to have the clinics at a school site like we do flu clinics, or if we would have to do them on-site somewhere where they have the refrigeration capabilities. But those are all kinds of issues that we have to work through. I'm just very happy that we'll be able to offer vaccinations to staff. One of the questions I'm getting is it required? It is not. There's not any legal mandate for people to take the vaccines. We certainly do encourage it. I certainly do intend when it's my turn to get a shot, I'm going to get one. I don't want to be in front of anybody else, but I certainly will, and I have confidence that they're safe, and would encourage everybody that teachers to take it. But it's not something that we would require. This will help us to have better immunity toward our goal of keeping our doors open, so that we don't have to go online as much. So having said that, I don't really have any specific recommendation for a change in operating schedule at this point. And should that change, I'll certainly be in touch with Mr. Jones, and we may have need to call a meeting if that would be the case. So.
Has there been any explanation of why some school systems have already received their shots, Johnson City, Washington County in particular?
We have asked that question, and it was addressed a little bit on the call that we had yesterday with the commissioner, and I think it was Dr. Jones with the Tennessee Department of Health, responded in such a way. In some, the health departments are given a vaccine. They don't get to say, send me this or that. It's this kind of shows up, if I understand it. And some of the vaccines particular, and I don't want to speak out of turn or to say something wrong, but my understanding is that one of the vaccines comes in a larger batch, and once you kind of thaw it out or whatever, there's a window of opportunity to use it. And so in some cases, I think people have been offered the vaccine out of order, so to speak. And I've heard in different counties. We are a part of the Sullivan County Regional Health Department, so the vaccines that we would receive would be through our health department. the other health departments get different amounts of vaccine and probably different brands. So my understanding is that in some cases, there were some sites that were in the situation, if you don't offer this to people that are available, it's going to go to waste. And so rather than have it go to waste, I think some people were offered the vaccine in some places that were not in the specific designated order, so. Any other questions about that? Again, I don't have a specific recommendation. I will give you information as it's updated, and I will apprise you of the key points of our, what we learn tomorrow from the health department. Okay? So at this point, one of the items that we talked about last time was the proposed lease of property at Sullivan East Middle School, and I know Mr. Hull is working on that, and I'll just ask him to make whatever comments he has at this time about the progression of that project.
Well, it is progressing slowly. As last time we talked about getting some forms and samples of similar types of leases, and that's been a little slow coming in, but I've got that, so we'll be getting that thing done and hopefully ready to go for the next board meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Hull? Okay, this is just a work session. Last time, we shared with you a proposal from ESS to manage our substitutes. So we do recommend that and would ask the board to formally approve that. Since our last meeting, we did, Ms. Deloach did contact the company and let them know of the change that the board made with the temporary change in the sub-pay. And so they can accommodate that, but we would ask the board to vote to allow us to enter into an agreement with ESS to begin managing our substitute teacher. Okay, any questions? Okay, at this point, the next item on the agenda is the continuation of the conversation regarding the public-private partnership option for West Ridge. And so Mr. Belgeri is here this evening. You have some additional information that he has provided that's a part of your agenda you pack, and I think, let me get back to the screen, and Ms. Nave, I think, is prepared to put that information up so that we can see some of that. So, I don't, Mr. Jones, did you want to say anything before we turn it over to Mr. Belgeri?
We have looked at various legal opinions. Mr. Hull has been checking with different people that's involved with this to try to get different points of view, and we still have conflicting information. And Pat, if I say something that's incorrect, you let me know. But we still have conflicting information of what all we can do legally with a public-private partnership. I have done some research and reading on private roads, and I know that if there's any way for us to accomplish this, I think it's going to have to be as a private road, or we call it private driveway too. I think one of the things mentioned private driveway. But if I have read correctly, and if the legal opinions that we've been given are correct, the school system cannot construct a road, a county road or a highway, but they can build a private road if it's done through a legal contract. Now, I may be putting words in the attorney's mouth here, I'm not sure, but I think it's important that we make sure we ask every question we can legally to try to get a resolution to whether or not we can do anything. I know Jim has given us some additional information about payback and some other things, and also a memorandum of understanding that I know I've looked at, and I think Pat has looked at it today, but this would require a lot more background information. But Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about what your proposal is, so then we can and you could refresh us, and I know there's going to be some additional questions. Mark's already asked some, and we've got answers to some of those, and so, Jim, if you'd kind of refresh us on what your proposal is, and then we'll have some questions probably that we'll want to ask.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones, and thank you for the opportunity to the board. The proposal that we are providing is for the Board of Education and a limited liability corporation, LLC, to enter into an agreement to develop a development plan for this roadway. There's about 3 pages of whereases and therefores, but in the final analysis, this is an agreement wherein the private portion would be responsible and tasked with building a road, essentially. There is a preferred alignment that would basically attach to Jericho Drive, City of Kingsport public road, and extend directly into the Westridge School. I think what's being displayed on the board, and I'm sure you have copies of it, is that alignment in a preliminary rendering. It does show some width of right-of-way, including some very important sloping areas, some fill areas that are required to make it a level roadway. Since this was first brought up, the partnership in concert with our proposed contractors has spent quite a bit of time trying to put some numbers around this process. I think when I spoke with some of you in December, I was talking about somewhere between $3.5 million and $5 million, and we've pretty much beat those numbers to death, and have really feel pretty good about an estimate that's going to say that the roadway, when complete, will have consumed $4.4 million, and that's the bare construction cost and development cost, design and right-of-way acquisition and everything. So that number is reflected on page 3 of the memorandum of understanding. It's listed in bold, and it's got a footnote that says essentially if the county says, okay, we want to pay you cash, either however the cash is generated, at the end of the process, when the property is dedicated, that's our best estimate of the number. Now, also in that same table, there's a bottom row of cells, and what I've put in there is the debt service including principal and interest, assuming a 10-year example. And that number, which basically is a time payment of that $4.4 million over a 10-year period, the total expenditure would be $5.8 million, essentially.
That would turn out to be about $580,000 a year, is that?
Yes, that's, the 10-year option would be $579,000 a year. The wording of the document is basically leading the two parties to another agreement. This is just a memorandum of understanding. The other agreement would lay out the specifics of the roadway. Every roadway has a design specified width, and in some cases you have curbs and gutters. Some cases you have sidewalks. Those things, and you actually also have a lot of parameters, design parameters, including the horizontal curvature, how tight a curve you would make, vertical curvature, how steep a slope would be allowed in the alignment. And those, to a small degree, have already been incorporated into the attachment on the proposal called Exhibit A. So those details certainly need to be refined a little bit in order to produce working drawings. But essentially, that alignment listed as Exhibit A is pretty much meets all of those parameters that would be used in the design.
Now, the right-of-way that you're talking about acquiring from the Shriners, that's kind of there where it's showing up as blue. Is that right there where you first cross that culvert?
Yes. This alignment, well, actually, the road where it crosses the Jericho Shrine property is inadequate. The section of the roadway is too narrow. That curve down there at the bottom is basically a 90-degree turn.
Right.
So these changes are basically made to fit the design parameters, and it will require that some right-of-way be requested from the Jericho Shriners. This is a strictly private venture. There's no such thing as eminent domain. No one can go in and take the property.
Right.
I have just today, as a matter of fact, been in contact with the Shriners, thanks to Dr. Cox. The reason we haven't really gone to them yet is for the simple reason that they have a change in leadership that takes place on January the 12th. So actually before about now, the new potentate or the new president of the fraternity was not able to do any work. But we have a meeting set up with them on this Friday. So if we get positive thoughts out of this meeting tonight and the meeting on Thursday, that meeting, we'll go forward with some very specific expectations. We anticipate that the amount of property needing to be acquired, that in addition to what's already owned by the city of Kingsport, would be somewhere in the vicinity of, but probably less than an acre. So it's not, we're not taking property that, or requesting property that they have a current use for. And my conversation today was very positive, and they felt like that was something that they definitely wanted to talk about. It would improve their, the access to their property just as well.
Now, does the city own the road up past Waste Management to the culvert?
Yes, the city owns, actually, and this is not by survey, but if you look at that map, there's a place at which the roadway makes a hard turn and goes up the hill.
Right.
To this Jericho Temple. That, according to the Jericho people, is where their private right-of-way begins.
Okay.
And we would, or the partnership would be acquiring basically property from the crossing of Russell Creek all the way over to the entry of onto the Bishop property, which is the property that's under option.
Now, the 2 acres at the top of the hill where the house is, that's not part of the proposal, is it?
Well, no, it's the roadway does not get into that area at
Okay.
all. That 2 acres, at some point in time, will probably be available. It's currently under foreclosure under a reverse mortgage, and that, I'm sure we have some people at the table here that understands a whole lot more about that than I do, but that's is a complicating factor. But this proposal does not depend in any way on that property being acquired.
Questions for Mr. Belgeri?
I've got a couple. In reviewing kind of the history of how we got where we are now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talked about this years ago, when you were in your elected role, we could not use the bond issuance to build a road legally. I mean, it was crystal clear. That would have been completely illegal for the school board to do that. I know you made the proposal to the county commission to use the highway department's reserve fund that you had built up in your role, and that was denied by a close vote. Has there been any work done by the county commission or the county highway department to improve any of those roads? And I get it, you're in your role as a private citizen. I know how familiar you are with, and you're trying to step up and help the county. I'm just want to clarify, because in reading the timeline, there was a grant that was applied for, it was denied, then all the way
Denied by the state.
Correct, by TDOT.
There was
and then you offered to use your reserve at the highway department funds that were already there. That was denied by the county commission. That surplus has since been expended by the county highway department. Now, is my understanding, even though their budget has increased, they don't have that kind of reserve. I'm just trying to understand, what has our body that's charged with developing our county roads done to work with us? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I want to work with them. I mean, but have they done any work other than clearing the right of way?
Well, recent history, probably going back about 15 months, and I live right here. I drive a granddaughter to Central every morning, and I take that route. So about 15 months ago, there were some survey stakes placed, and as a matter of fact, I talked to the people out there, and you know, I asked, well, what are y'all going to do? And oh, we're going to ride in this road. We're going to make this the route into the school. So, and again, I'm not reflecting on anybody personally, but you know, there's more to a road, as I talked about, than just width of pavement. And I think that they have worked for several months, those 11 months, intervening months, with the intention of widening the road. But yet, I've seen no indication that they're trying to acquire right-of-way. Based on my experience 2.5 years ago, I don't know of anybody along Lynn Road that is even would begin to consider selling right-of-way. So that would almost inevitably result in a taking of property. And again, as I talked about before, the road is really, the width is only one factor, and certainly not the most important factor. The horizontal and vertical curvature are the two things that make a road safe or unsafe. And the Lynn Road alignment is not safe. It's not just me. TDOT has looked at it. They recommended against doing that improvement. They called it not recommended. More recent history, I continued to pass that area for the intervening months, and I saw the flags and the staking was still there. And then about the middle of probably in July, I saw some more activity. There were more stakes. There were a couple of trees felled up. It looked like it was off the right-of-way, but I don't really know what transpired. And so at that point, I approached the, and I was at that point already had this plan in mind. So I approached the commissioner, who's chairman of the executive committee, and asked him to check into it. He called me back and he said, yeah, they were going to start to widen it because they couldn't even get two buses past each other on that road section. So they were going to widen it. And so on about, I don't know, the 20th of October, I believe, I got a message from that commissioner, and he said they've given up. They started trying to do it, but they're not going to be able to do it. So that was the point at which I brought the proposal forward to Mayor Venable, and Mayor Venable in turn put Mr. Jones and I together, and that was around the 1st of December when we first met, I believe. So we're within 5 weeks of that first meeting. That's the history. There are some there are some issues that will probably require commission action, even if they're not required to approve expenditures by this body, which I don't know. That's above my pay grade. And one of those issues is the partnership and our designers believe that the best way to affect this the safety of this road is to close Lynn Road entirely. And of course, the commission is going to have to approve that. This exhibit that we're looking at here shows an option that would basically raise the grade of Lynn Road up to the new road and then take it back down. That is shown only as a possibility that would be the only thing that was approved by the commission. That's not what the partnership should want to do. Lynn Road, I believe I'm safe in saying that I've talked to over half of those people, and they would love to have their road closed. Those people on the that own those condominiums there, the private home, which is the same owner as the condominiums, Mr. Odom, who owns a wide swath through there, the Gray family, Lori Gray, right on the worst corner, right there. Going all the way back to 2.5 years, well, actually 4 years ago, when the school site was first selected, every one of those people have come to me personally and said, we don't want that traffic on that road. That road, everybody knows that road is a trap. So currently in front of the county commission is a resolution to direct the highway department to widen Lynn Road to 24-foot width. Once again, that's really a very small improvement. Going to be a complicated improvement, but a very small improvement. It doesn't really increase the safety. It would allow the 2 school buses to pass, certainly, but the key is vertical and horizontal curvature for safety. And I don't even know that the highway department has a set of plans. I asked for an opportunity to look at the plans, if any existed, and I did not receive a favorable indication. So something similar to this, if Lynn Road is going to be the primary route, needs to be prepared and so that it can be evaluated.
And that's what I'm struggling with, and I'm glad we're talking about it, even though I'm not even going to say technically, because the school board should not be having to build roads. But somebody's got to do it. So do you know, Mr. Bilgeri, and I'll try to talk to Mr. Conkin, I tried to call him, but we missed each other, what the mechanism that might allow this? Because I think, I get where Mr. Jones is coming from. I think the only way would be if it's a private road, because other than a turnaround for a school bus or postal, I know the county can't, work on that. I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me in just a moment. Oh, it talks about, even in the Public-Private Partnership Act, which Mr. Iverson raised that question that was forwarded on, and that's the only thing I had found too. When you read into the definitions, it has to be the body that's, it can be a board, but it has to be the body that's responsible for the action. And that's my concern, is that before it was crystal clear, we couldn't use the bond funds. I mean, we couldn't even really probably have used them to do anything on a private road. But if we're talking about a reserve fund, I guess, do you know if Mr. Conkin has any opinion whether this board even has that authority? Or, I mean, I think it's a discussion still worth continuing, and maybe whatever body that is will actually help us do what they're supposed to for the county.
I'd like to add one thing, just because I've been looking into this a lot more too. And the city of Kingsport is planning this summer to do work on Lynn Road. I did find that's in their summer projects. So I don't know the extent of that, and I didn't get a copy of what it is, but according to the mayor's office, the highway department there is doing expansions and improvements this summer. The part that Mr. Belgeri was talking about is it was presented and went through first reading through the county commission this last month to do improvements on Lynn Road. So I did talk to the highway department and asked them, what they were talking about. And one of the things that concerned me at the time, and I was curious about, was one of the, I guess it was the paper that you gave us actually had 2 circles drawn on Lynn Road to maybe like either do a circle or a cul-de-sac. And that was what I was asking them, how that would go and what that would be. And they said, well, that would make all the work that we're planning useless. So they said at that point, if that's the way we go, then that's the way we go, but they're not going to make any of their improvements. And the city of Kingsport is pretty much thinking the same way from my discussions with them. So I know that they are looking at least at Lynn Road, and I don't know about anything else they're doing, but the county commission, the highway department, Sullivan County, and the city of Kingsport are all 3 looking at road improvements on Lynn Road currently.
How much of Lynn Road is in the city?
I really truly don't know. I didn't get any kind of like a
See-
plan or a copy of the plan.
I think Shipley Ferry coming in from the south side under the 81, that's city,
That's city?
up to almost the entrance to the high school.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
There's a sign there that says Sullivan County.
Yeah.
Beyond Lynn Road over to Browder, that's not city, is it?
Well, actually, it
Is it?
picks up right at Browder
Yeah.
and goes all the way to,
Past Henry Har, all the way to the high school?
no, it picks up at Browder
And goes over to
and
Fieldcrest?
goes over the hill to Childress Ferry.
Yes, or Fieldcrest and Childress Ferry butt
Yeah.
together.
Yep.
According to our highway department, the 2 circles that he drew, I asked them if that'd be something that they would have to do, and they said both of those circles would be inside the city of Kingsport, so the city of Kingsport would decide if that portion of Lynn Road was closed.
See, the part of Lynn Road there, if you're coming from Lynn Road from Indian Springs area, if you're coming Lynn Road and you come to the intersection of stop sign there at Browder, turn right, Browder is in the city, but you turn left toward West Ridge, and I think that's still county.
That is county. That's
Okay.
correct.
And
Yeah.
that's the curvy part that we're talking about. That's where they cut the trees up on the hill.
Right.
Okay.
And there's a house within probably 20 feet of Lynn Road, I think they're the gray, I'm not sure if it's gray or not, but,
Yeah, Gray and a couple of Baker
right.
properties. right.
So when you say Lynn Road, it can get real confusing because
True.
where Browder intersects there with Lynn, because I drive it almost every day also, so.
And I truly didn't get a copy of Kingsport's plan. I didn't.
Who did you talk with in Kingsport?
The mayor.
Mayor?
He said that it's on their summer schedule to do improvements on Lynn Road.
Well, I know they're supposed to do Shipley Ferry.
Well,
because they were-
I'm sorry, I lied with that. I talked to a county commissioner that talked to the mayor, and it's on one of the ones that's sponsoring the bill. So they said that, the city mayor said that it's there. I'll call Pat tonight and make sure that.
My
I was told-
conversations with the city of Kingsport were that that section of Jericho that was not part of this plan was going to attach to this plan was going to be milled and filled this summer. And also, their section, the city section of Shipley Ferry was going to be worked on.
Yeah, they
I have
postponed.
not heard
Okay.
anything about
I'll
Lynn Road at
clarify.
all.
By the time Thursday, I'll have
They,
it
they
clarified.
postponed the Shipley Ferry until we got the high school finished. That's my
Oh,
understanding from a
okay.
couple of years ago, that it was on the list to be paved, and they
Okay.
were waiting until the high school was finished because of the.
Yeah, the
truck
one
traffic.
the one thing that I've been given assurance is that by the street works people was that Jericho was going to be milled and repaved.
And that would be all the way over to Past Waste Management, right?
That's correct. Be all the way over to where the partnership's improvements would pick up.
Yeah. Let me do a follow-up and read a couple of facts so we're all on the same page. And I think these are facts taken from some articles that I've read and some minutes. Fact, West Ridge High School is scheduled to open in August of 2021. We're opening regardless of what the road is. Fact, traffic study has been completed with no required changes. I believe each of you have a copy of the traffic study that was submitted, and it does point out that the road is anywhere from 17 to 24 or 23 feet wide in places, and it said it needs to be, I thought it said 25, but it may have said 24 wide. But there was no recommended no required changes. Fact that Matthew alluded to, after TDOT denied state funds, the Sullivan County Commission declined to allow the Highway Commissioner to spend funds to design access road to West Ridge. This was in June of 2018, and I'm wanting everybody to see the numbers and the timeline here that we're dealing with. In a WJHL interview in June of 2018 with the new Highway Commissioner, stated that improving the roads leading up to West Ridge High School is a must. It's one of the first things on his to-do list. And if you get a chance, go back and look. The interview is still live. He stated, "I wasn't against the road, the new road. I was against using Highway Department funds to build it." That's a fact. He stated, "My job is to make these roads feeding the new school as safe as possible, and that is what I intend to do." This is in June of 2018. In April of 2018, the Highway Commissioner stated the responsibility for the access road would fall on the Board of Education. I mean, that's a statement from him. My next thing is, what's our options? Number one, open West Ridge with any improvements that the Highway Commissioner can make by August 2021. And I've talked to the Highway Commissioner after the last County Commission meeting. Second thing we could do, commit to a purchase of a private road costing approximately $6 million by entering into a 10-year contract with Jericho Partners to purchase a private road designed and built by them. Third option, wait and do nothing. As I see it, those are the only three options that we really have. Be at the mercy of the Highway Commissioner to do whatever improvements he can do and get done by August of 2021. Enter into an agreement, which I don't think we have the money to do, but that's something the board would have to vote on. Or, as I said, wait and do nothing. Regardless, if we enter into a contract, we have challenges. Number one, what's the legal implications? This is something that Pat's has been working on, and I know Matthew has tried to get in touch with Joel Conkin, who is working with Jericho Partners. Another challenge, will the County Commission approve the contract to commit future Sullivan County funds to pay for this? Even if we have the money, if we can find the money, will the County Commission approve that? I don't know. It's a torn toss, but these may not be facts that we want to look at, but it's a fact. Mary?
Chairman Jones, just again, because I'm the newbie on the block here. Seems like I heard through the grapevine, and we all know how that grapevine is, before I ever became a school board member. I guess I understood, coming on the board, that we had a plan for the road way back when, that we were led to believe that the mayor and commissioners were on board to take care of the road. Was that just, did I hit, was that grapevine accurate at the time?
I would say it was accurate at the time. It was whether or not it was a written plan, there was a lot of discussion, I know. I believe, if I remember correctly, in December of 2016, when the bond money was passed, in January of 2017, Jim presented to the county commission a plan. We had a meeting with TDOT, I believe, wasn't it, January of 2017, and they came in, and actually the county commission approved them to enter into negotiations with TDOT, or to a contract with TDOT, to try to come up with the grant money. That the county commission actually approved that. TDOT turned it down because it did not have accessibility all the way over to Highway 126, I believe, there in the Indian Springs area.
Well, my understanding of that, Mr. Jones, is that the funds, the grant funds, were really designated by law for industrial access. And that the use of the grant funds for educational access was contrary to.
So that's why it was denied.
Yeah.
And then immediately after that, Ms. Belgeri made the proposal to spend the, I think, $300,000 to do a design of the high school, of the access road. That was just the design phase. And that was voted down, I believe, in 2018, or spring of 2018, maybe June of 2018.
So really what you're telling me is politics got involved and things shifted.
That's pretty much.
I mean, I'm just a straight
Yes,
shooter, that's
pretty
just how it
much-
is.
That's pretty much the way it is.
That's what happened.
The election changed it.
It's a fact the county commission knew where the school was gonna be when they approved the bond issuance. And then we've had these same kind of discussions back then when, after Mr. Belgeri said, I'll use my reserve fund at the highway department, and they turned that down. I mean, we had nobody coming to us with a public-private partnership, and we couldn't legally use those bond funds. That part was crystal clear on that one, and I don't think anyone disputed that. This is a little bit different, although I think it's important to review that, and that's not to point the finger at anybody. It's just saying
It's just facts.
that it's just facts, and I hope we don't go with option 3, which is to do nothing, because that seems, unless we talk about it and these other departments start coming together, that's all that's happened is nothing. And it's not for a lack of effort, especially from Mr. Belgeri in his elected role and now privately, but that's my only concern, is I'm not sure we can, our body could even legally do it, but I think it's a great proposal, and at least somebody's finally talking about it. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to say, well, why didn't you all figure that out to the school board? But if you look at duties and statutes and laws, that's not what we're here to do, So it's not to point the finger, but we need to figure it out.
Yep. I think CTAS is the article I sent you, is that right,
Yeah.
Pat? And that one says very clearly that it's the duty of the Highway Commission to build highways. So we cannot build a highway. Now, can we buy a pre-built highway? Can we buy a pre-built private road? I think the answer to that might be yes, but that's above my pay grade, as he says. So the two attorneys and other attorneys are going to have to tell me whether or not that's something that can be proposed.
Well, from my standpoint, if I could
Please do.
jump in there, there are school districts in our state that have used public-private partnerships. Now, obviously, those situations may have been very different from ours, but my belief is, and I think in talking with everyone, if we're going to just dream that this would work, we'll have to get the buy-in of the county commission and probably the city to some extent. And I did talk to Mr. Cagle this morning, and I've talked to him extensively. I think our position would be if we can get all of that, we believe we can find a way to overcome the legal hurdles. Now, that would mean that with a lot of work done between now and then, but I'm optimistic about that part. So I'd say let's work on the getting everybody bought in, and then we'll try to iron out those details. And I again, I talked to Mr. Cagle, and he said his firm would, I talked to them over the weekend and just throwing some things around, and, they would jump on board and help us, and I think we would need that. This is a very specialized field, but we believe from our standpoint that we can steer that through some way.
And part of what we're facing here is a timeline. I think you have an option on the property until what, mid-April or late April?
Yes, that's correct.
The other thing is.
But I need to also note that there is a trigger point on January 31st when my option, the partnership's option, requires some skin in the game,
Yes.
so to speak.
So, does that require action on the part of the board before we can move forward to see? I think the board has to make a motion to do something if we want to take it to county commission. We can't go to the county commission and say, we might be able to do this. We got to have something definitive to take to them, or it reverts back to do nothing. And go ahead, Dr. Rouse.
Well, I just want to say that I agree with Mr. Spivey. I don't think we can just sit back and do nothing. However, I think it's disgraceful that we're going to take money that could improve every student's education in Sullivan County, which is what we're charged to do. That's what the law plainly says that we are to do, is to help the students. So it absolutely is a hard one for me to swallow, to know that we're going to take money that another department should be responsible for doing.
Could I ask one question about the pricing of it? You said you pared it down and did some things, and that's great, I appreciate that. Is that included closing Lynn Road, or is that the improving of Lynn, like the raising of Lynn Road in the price that you gave us?
The price I gave you is the raising of Lynn Road.
The raising of Lynn Road, okay.
So there would be some savings,
If they just close it,
nice savings, if that road was closed.
okay.
You have to keep the Ship Ferry Road open into the high school, and that's something that I talked to Mr. Belgeri about on the design, because we have the annex there at Central, at the old Central building, and students who are coming from the old Central, they have to have a way to come down and come under the 81 and go up into the high school. So we can't close Lynn Road on both sides, or at least in my opinion, we could not close it. It would.
If I could speak to that, if I could refer to the Exhibit A, at the very bottom of this plan is the 4 lanes of interstate, and
Right.
then there's the 2 bridges.
Yes.
If you'll notice that right after you come under the 2 bridges,
Yeah,
there's a road actually right into the site. So the opportunity exists to enable traffic to come in from that side of.
that goes up by
Of
the
the new
retention pond, does it not?
Yeah,
on
it
the-
does. Yeah. But that could the funds required to improve Lynn Road up to that grade could easily take care of making this a secondary entrance. It may not be to the same geometric standards, but it could be an alternate route in there from that side.
Now, if you go back to something you said, Dr. Rouse, about taking money from one department and paying for something of this nature, it may be off topic just a little bit, but I think it's important for us to note Kettering School, K-8, is being paid for out of sales tax money, which is school board money, $15 million that was borrowed and paid for out of school system money, sales tax money that could have been spent on students and teacher salaries. The grants, the $24 million for ESG grants that was borrowed to pay for renovations in Emmett School, Holston Middle School, I believe, where we sit now with HVAC, and also some other school systems. A total of $24.2 million was borrowed and paid back out of sales tax money. Again, this is money that could have been spent on teacher salaries and on students. And if my numbers are correct, we have spent $59 million in the last 20-some years of school system money to pay for needs. Now, who's supposed to take care of the buildings? That becomes an issue. I realize that. Who's supposed to take care of the roads? Who's supposed to build the roads? So it's decisions that we make right now that's going to impact us for 10 years if we go with a 10-year loan. I just found out this week that there was a contract signed 10 years ago with Bristol Tennessee Electric System that committed us to make payments at Holston Valley Middle School for 10 years. We've still got a year to go on that contract, which means we're going to be spending about $10,000 to $12,000, I believe, for money that we're not receiving. But that was signed back in 2011 before any of us were on the board. So I think it's important for us to understand that decisions we make now could impact us 10 years down the road, and somebody's going to be sitting here saying, why did they do that, or why did they not do that? If we wait, the price of building this highway is going to go up. We know that in all probability. If we don't do anything, what's it going to cost us? We've got to remember we've got to do what's best for our students, and we've got to do what's best for our teachers. And you got your teaching salaries in one hand, you got the safety of students in the other hand, and you got a balancing act. And I don't have the answer. I don't have a recommendation. But this body, Mr. Hughes is out of town on work, but this body, including him, we will need to take action either to do something or to do nothing. And if we choose to do nothing, we live with the consequences until something else happens. Now, it may be that later on, in 2 years, that politics gets involved again, and maybe there's more money involved. And I hate that politics is involved in any form or fashion. But it is what it is. And we've got to deal with the problem. We've got a nice school sitting there on the hill. We've got a nice school at Sullivan East Middle School. We had to pay $250,000 for a turn lane at the middle school. That came out of school system money for that because it was required by TDOT. There's nothing required here because this is a county road. But I understand it, the state's not involved in making any requirements at the high school because it's on a county road. Will there be some recommended changes later? Possibly. But it's in our hands to do something, or it's in our hands to do nothing. And if we take no action, we're choosing to do nothing. If we take some action, we are putting ourselves out there on a limb and saying, will the county commission approve it? Will they allow us to use the money, if we can find it, to do it? And I don't know how much money we have that is available in fund balance. How much can we commit for the future? I don't have those numbers. But it behooves us to think long and hard about this proposal and to take politics out of it as much as we can. And that's
I think one of the things that you said, Mr. Jones, that we really haven't discussed, but I talked with Mr. Belgeri about this, and that sort of would point toward taking politics out of it. I mean, there's a safety factor to this for children. And, you know, that weighs, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm saying if we can get a buy-in from everybody, we'll try to find a way to make it work legally, because we just, in my mind, it's imperative that
Yes.
we do that.
And I have talked with Mr. Hull quite extensively in the last 2 weeks, I guess, at least by emails, if nothing else. We're open to any type of benevolent benefactor who would make donations.
Take a check.
And, you know, actually pursuing some things, aren't we, Pat?
Well,
we
so
don't-
you know,
we-
yes, that's where we are.
We haven't made any progress yet, but we are pursuing some things because it's a public-private partnership. And if we enter into a public-private partnership, we're the public part, and there's nothing that keeps us from accepting naming rights for athletic facilities, naming rights for the road, whatever it takes. The safety of our students should be number one.
Have we shared that new traffic study that we just got? I mean, you sent it out to us, but have we shared that with our highway department?
Yes.
Has there been any,
Yeah.
has there been conversation?
I asked Dr. Cost to send it to him just as.
Oh, no, I'm just, has there been
No,
conversation?
It was sent to Mr. Murray.
Has there been conversation? Have we talked to them and seen what they thought about it, or?
Just acknowledgement of receipt.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it had said, you know, this is what we need, what can you help us with? Okay.
One other thing that I've taken on myself to ask for, from Deneen West, I asked her to get a price on a gravel road from the high school over to Henry Horror Road. That's on the back side. Now, it's just a gravel road. And of course, that's something that the Highway Commission could do. I mean, that's work that they could do if it's something that the school system could afford. Now, that, when I said a gravel road, it would be an access road that would help us to relieve some of the traffic congestion initially, be unpaved, but she said that she thought she could get an estimate on that. That would be a kind of a ballpark figure, but I asked her for that. I think it was last week, wasn't it, David?
Because if we close that portion of Lynn Road, they're gonna have to go all the way around to the Sam's entrance unless we do something on the backside.
Right.
So, yeah,
But it would-
that's
but-
gonna be needed.
But it would get you back out there. That's the,
Right.
but we've got to look at all the different options that are there. And we've got to look at our budget and see what we can do and what we can't do. And,
Well, to that point, Mr. Jones, if it is legal to do the road in, it would certainly be legal and acceptable to the private part of the partnership to actually improve that road too. I mean, it's all access, and, you know, irregardless of who should do it, that partnership agreement could include that section of road too.
Pat and I were talking earlier tonight, maybe earlier today. Is there any way for the school system, if they were to enter into a contract, to recoup any of the costs for future development of that property by people that you would sell to or anything of that nature? I don't know if there's any legalities there that would allow that, or?
Well, I will say to this board, you know, it is always, well, not always, since this proposal was put together, it was the Jericho Partners' intention to commercially develop that property. But, you know, it's really not part of the equation right now. Not at all. I mean, I don't have any ideas. I don't have any purchasers. Nobody's beating on my door to give me a piece of that. property.
But
so-
right now, what we're looking at, if we entered into the agreement, we would be basically buying the road that you had built. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And with the right-of-ways across Jericho Shriners and everything. So we would own,
It'd still be a private road.
we'd own a private road. But it would be built to the county standards that could be turned over to the county for maintenance in the future if the school system so chose.
Well, to that point, the way the agreement is written, and I'm just trying to be fully transparent here, the way the agreement is written, at some point mutually agreeable, that road would become from a public right-of-way to a private right-of-way. Now, some would argue that should happen where you cross Russell Creek, you know. And others, the Jericho Partners, would require that that transfer point be somewhere that would allow Jericho Partners to access that property for development. So it's not as simple as saying, yeah, it can be a private road. You paid for it. There are some other considerations.
Parts of it would be private.
Parts of it would be private. That's the way the agreement is
Right.
written.
I thought that's the way I read it.
Doesn't that make it more of a legal challenge? If we're going to enter into an agreement for a private road with the understanding that it's not going to stay private, doesn't that automatically make it to where we're kind of, that seems like that would defeat the whole legal battle if it come about. I mean, it seems like we're stacking the deck against us.
But
Well, it
it's-
does complicate it some, yes.
It's kind of like developing a subdivision. When you develop a subdivision, the road starts out as a private road by the developer, but if it's built to the county standards, it's turned over to the county and it becomes a county road. Because I see highway commissioners out there paving subdivision roads in certain places.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I understand that, but I mean, it's like if we're trying to use this public-private partnership and that the law that allows that, and then we're saying, well, we'll make it as a private road to allow us to build it, but the intention at the very start is to not stay a private road, we're going to immediately turn it over, even in the agreement that we're writing. It just seems like that makes it more of a legal challenge.
Well, there's, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Hull, but, you know, there's more than one kind of public right-of-way. And, but there is only one kind of private right-of-way. And that means that if it's a private right-of-way, you could construct a gate across, and that was the opportunity to have the security amenities that are still part of the possibilities. At that point, for certain, it would have to become a private road. In other words, you cannot gate off for any reason a public right-of-way.
But I mean, we're saying right off the bat, it's gonna start as a private road from the Sam's entrance to, or basically from the portion of road that stops now to the entrance.
Well-
Yeah, and Waste Management up to the high school is what we're talking about, building a private road. Is that,
No, that's what I was trying to clarify, is that in order for Jericho Partners to be a part of it, there would have to be a means for Jericho Partners to develop the
So it
the
can't-
part of the 8 acres that is not under road.
so it can't be tagged as a private road?
Well, at some point, it could be. For instance, let's take where it runs into the roundabout at the school. If you came back from that roundabout,
Say where the
probably
Kirkland Road is.
probably 500 or 600 feet, you could certainly make it private from there on.
So that kind of leads me back to the same thing we were talking about. If you're saying that, if we're talking about that and saying that that part from maybe Lynn Road or wherever we decide to put a gate or an entrance is going to be private, But the rest of what we're paying for is gonna be public. I think that puts us back in that legal ballpark of can we actually do it? So I guess that's a challenge for you, Mr. Hull.
I think it's a complication.
Yeah,
It's one of those
okay.
things that have to be worked through.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll leave in your capable hands.
But I'll give you. Let me get my hearing aid adjusted. I'll give you Dan Street's interpretation, and I'm going to read his answer. I researched the question of whether the county could enter into a business partnership with a private entity earlier this year and was satisfied that they could not. It amounts to lending the credit of the county with the Tennessee which the Tennessee Constitution forbids. However, from what I read in the paper, it sounds like the school board is going to buy the road once it's completed and make installment payments on the purchase price. That could be legal, as it sounds the same as the purchase of a land and a building. Then you have questions as to who is actually going to fund the purchase, such as the school board or the county, and the school board. Then you have questions of what account they're going to take it out of and so forth. But he basically said that if it were going to be us borrowing the money, that's illegal. But if we're buying the product, like the land and the building, then it probably would be legal. Was that your interpretation, Pat, of after you? And this was last of December when, and he just responded to a question.
Yeah, and that was just off the top of his head.
Right.
He
And-
hadn't spent a lot of time. Well, that brings me to, I guess, a difficult question here. And we're all trying to find a solution. It sort of seems like to me that, we're building a road into our school, which is at the end of the road. A lot of the other landowners along the way, eventually, I suppose, and the Jericho Partners will also have the benefit of that road. So I guess it concerns me as to why we would pay for the whole thing.
That's
And I
right.
think that's what Mr. Jones was asking.
That's what I was trying to say a while ago.
If there's going to be a business over all along, I mean, we're funding as if it's only our road. So, I mean, convince me why, that I'm seeing that wrong, or maybe I'm not seeing it wrong, but.
Well, I guess I would have to respond that, why would you want to own a road? You're only considering owning a road because there are no other options, safe options. So, owning a road, it really creates responsibilities. Sullivan County has 900 miles of road, and they don't gain a single dime from that ownership. All they do is pay money to keep them going. Now, there's property tax payers along the road, obviously, and that's the net return is if you don't have a road to a piece of property, you don't receive a reasonable rate of return from taxes. So, it's really not a question of buying a road. It's a question of buying access. And how do you put a dollar figure on access? We've got a dollar figure here. This is what it costs to access that piece of property. That's one option. I don't know that it's the only option. I do know that, based on my prior studies, Lynn Road is not an option.
Let me make another statement, or maybe ask a question. If we don't do something, you would give up your right of, your option on the land, is that right?
Uh,
Or you may, I don't say you will.
No, I very likely will, yes.
If that land stays on the market and is purchased by somebody who wants to develop something, then the opportunity to use that as access road is gone, right? Unless the school system buys the property, which we had hoped to do at one point, but money kept us from doing that. But my point is, it's not just a matter of this or nothing. If you don't take it, there may be 2 or 3 fast food stores or fast food places that come in and say, we're going to put a store here. And then we lose the opportunity to actually gain the access, so we're right back to where we were with the Lynn Road option. And I'm not using that as a scare tactic, I'm just putting it out there as a possible fact. That's not necessarily a fact, but I do have been told that there's going to be some form of a truck stop there in front of Second Harvest Food Bank, and I don't know that for a fact, but if you do go on Tennessee Property Data page, you'll find that I think 5 acres was recently sold to some type of oil company. It's not the first 5 acres on the road, but it's the second. It's one next to the Second Harvest, if I looked at it correctly.
That's correct, yes.
And so there's a possibility of another business going in there. At one time, it was going to be a convenience store, but I think that has changed, and now the oil company owns that. And the other 5 acres there is where the old Sam's service station used to be, or the gas station. That's not been sold yet. It's still, I don't know if it's for sale or not, but it's still owned by the heirs of the same family, I think, if I look correctly.
That's correct.
But there's just lots of different moving pieces to this puzzle right now, and they change daily. And to complicate matters even more, there is an old cemetery down there next to Waste Management that goes back hundreds of years. I think it goes back to it's the Suisun, I think it's the Suisun Cemetery.
Mhm.
Goes back to maybe the Indians and so forth, Cherokees. So it's not land that you could take. It's on the other side of Waste Management, so it's not land that you could actually go through on that side.
So let's just hypothetically, we agree, we do whatever we need to do, we build the road. 14 potholes happen. Who fixes the road?
If it's a private road, the owner fixes.
Us.
That's correct.
Until you turn it over to the county or to the city. In this case, it'd probably be the city that you would turn it over to, be my guess.
Although that's not,
So would the city, and again, this is my ignorance here, but would the city be excited about getting a new road like that we've just built? So
Well, I
would they
think-
want to take ownership?
no, I think the city has the same view as I do, that whenever you build or annex or take possession by dedication, what you're getting is a responsibility for the road.
Okay, I don't understand though.
Well,
I'm saying if we build the road, I guess we would want to turn it over so we wouldn't have that responsibility anymore.
that's correct. That's correct.
So would they be willing to take it?
As far as my conversations with the streets department, yes, they would.
Okay.
Now, that's a long way
I
from
understand.
a Board of Mayor and Alderman action, but there was no resistance to that.
Let's suppose that we voted to do something and enter into an agreement. The question becomes, what's the next step? As I see it, it would require a resolution that we would take to the county commission, asking them to allow us to enter into this contract and use our money. And then they could pass on they could pass on one meeting with waiver of rules, or they could take 2 meetings, which would be 2 months. So we're not talking about a quick process, anyway we look at it. Even if we voted this Thursday night to do something, then you're looking at 1 to 2 months for the county commission, and that kind of defeats part of the purpose of trying to get things moving quickly to have an August 1st deadline of this contract. And I'm not convinced, it would take 16 votes of the county commission, I believe, to pass it on a waiver of rules. I don't know that would happen. I don't know that you get 13 votes to do it. But is it something that you want to think about between now and Thursday night of whether or not we even attempt to move forward? Because if the county commission says, no, we're not going to approve it for you, we're dead in the water on this.
But we will have done what we can do.
We would have, right. But if they do approve it, then where do we come up with $580,000 a year for the next 10 years to make a payment? I mean, and that goes back to if we have savings, we're trying to do teacher salaries, unless Pat really twists some arms and gets some donations through some of the benefactors. So between now and Thursday night, I mean, if somebody doesn't make a motion, I guess it dies in the water. If they do make a motion, then it has to be written in such a way that it would be a resolution that we would take to the county commission. That gives Pat a couple more days to get some more legal advice as far as that's concerned, and maybe Matthew from his contacts, since he has some background in this too, and do some reading on this stuff. And I've read to where when I think I understand it, I find something else and I don't understand it.
Wouldn't somebody that brings it forward as a proposal have to have a funding mechanism? I mean, we can't just say we're gonna do this without trying to figure out where it's gonna come from our budget. I mean, we'd have to, you're gonna have to pay for it. So, I mean, it's not just them letting us use it.
I've gone back and looked at resolutions that the board has written before,
Okay.
and the funding mechanism says that the school board will make it available from sales tax revenue. Now,
Okay.
what that does, it puts the monkey on our backs when we
Okay.
start doing the budget in January of trying to make sure that we got the money to where we can do that. Now, some of it would come out of fund balance, I'm sure, that we could do some of that, but
So we don't have to find it first, it'll be something, okay,
you
that's
have,
fine.
you have to put it in that resolution. I read one resolution
Sales
today
tax.
from, where it was done, and the county commission said, when they passed it, they said the school board or the Sullivan County Department of Education has assured us that they have money in their sales tax revenue of where they can make this payment. That was on the $24.2 million bond
Okay.
issue. And, but then when you start passing the budget each year, it becomes a challenge. It's not just, it's done real quickly or painlessly.
That's a pretty big bite. I mean,
It's-
that's a lot.
Well, I mean, I'm just laying all the facts out there that I know of.
I appreciate it. I
And,
appreciate it.
And Jim and I both trying to be transparent with what we know and maybe what we don't know sometimes, but
And I appreciate all the answers. I mean, I sent a lot of questions, and I mean, I really do appreciate the answers I got back. And I even appreciate when the ones that say, I don't know. And that's good. I mean, because it makes people think and makes people talk, and I appreciate it. So thank you guys very
Well,
much for answering.
we've got, Mary said something earlier tonight, and that's, we've got to come together as a unit, even if we don't agree on things. We've got to come together as a unit, as a family, and make decisions that's good for our kids. I mean, we've all got grandkids, most of us anyway. Matthew's got kids, but most of us got grandkids. Paul's got kids. I didn't make you that old, Paul, but yeah, he's only 38.
So, feel a lot older. Worked graveyard a couple times.
But we've got to come together to solve the problem in some form or fashion, and we, tonight is not finger pointing at people. Jim said to me today, anything's on the table. In other words, he said we can discuss whatever, and I knew that meant whatever, politics or whatever it is. And it's not finger pointing, it's just simply saying, here's the facts, Mary, here's where we've been, here's where we're trying to get to. Someone's gonna say, well, why didn't you have this figured out first? I can assure you that if we'd have tried to build a road before we built a school, we'd been laughed out of the county. We'd been laughed out of the state, probably.
That's not what
Yeah, we're not,
schools
yeah.
do.
I agree, we're not even supposed to be,
I mean,
that we're discussing. this
I'm
is
not
kind of
laughing
ludicrous.
because it's funny, it's just, it's
Yeah.
just sad that we're even having to sit here.
agree.
And I thank Mr. Bill J. for coming in as a private citizen after he was an elected official to try to fix the problem, because, and that's not pointing a finger, but nothing's been done. I mean, everybody in the county knew where the site was when the bond was approved. The law was clear, we can't build the road.
Yeah.
Nothing's been done, so if nobody else is gonna do it, we gotta try to do something. I just,
And, you know, I felt like that in 2018 in June, when the new commissioner said he was going to widen the road that would be started, and at that time, for y'all's information, the school was supposed to open in August of 2020. So he was looking 2020, and he made those statements, and here we are looking at 2021, and it's still not completed. And
I'd actually like to see if we could possibly reach out to him now that we've given him that study to ask for, I mean, at least some kind of, I mean, you know, it's talking about coming together as a family, I agree, but it's like at least have some conversation with him now and say, we've sent you this study, this is what we're needing. I know that you're talking with the county commission as far as they already went through first reading, but can you tell us that you'll help us? Can you tell us what's going on? I think we at least need to have all the cards on the table.
I asked him, I said, if we owned the property
Okay.
across the street from the road, from the high school, is that something you all could do? And he said, well, I could probably help with that.
Okay.
And, but, you know, I don't know if he's got the manpower, even if we owned it, if he could do the road.
I won't speak to that.
I mean, I don't, because I would imagine that you almost have to either have to bid it out and get outside assistance, or, in this case, we're not bidding.
Right.
We're allowing Jim to do the negotiating and do Summers Taylor, I think it is, that who it is that we're dealing with? But
And to that point, you know, I'm still personally looking for a solution. If this is not the solution, but if the solution is the school board or the county needs to own the Bishop property, it's for sale, you know. If I let my option go, they're gonna wanna sell it to somebody
Right.
still.
well, they've tried to sell it to us, and like I said, it's just that we did not have the money to do it. That was before, you know, you were involved in it. Other questions? I hope you all don't see this as a waste of time. I just think that we got to get the facts out there and try to keep the emotions out of it, and you know, go from there with it. But Jim, I appreciate you giving us your evening, and that sorry you had to wait, but we had the agenda out there, so.
No, my honest appreciation for having the opportunity to answer these questions, and if there's more, you know, you have my cell
We
number.
got your number.
And I'll be here Thursday too, if you want.
At Central.
I'll be here all week.
That's Central.
Yeah, we're not here, we're at Central High School Thursday. Great.
As the old joke goes, I'll be here all week.
Well, we're going to move on to,
Thanks for helping me find the place.
Okay.
let's see.
With your leave, I'll leave.
Huh?
If it's okay with y'all, I'll leave.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we still on for the attorney-client privilege meeting?
Yes,
We
if
are.
we could move to that, that would be good.
Okay, we're going to go into recess, and Rick Widener, you can't participate. So,
Is there anything after? Are we done with our normal stuff?
The only thing left is the West Ridge updates. I could do
Could we
that.
just
If you want, I
do
can
that
do
and
that.
adjourn?
I
Okay.
can do that Thursday night or.
okay, we can do that Thursday night. So we will adjourn this meeting and go into our attorney-client meeting.
Can the attorney have a 5-minute break?
Yeah.